approach of sorrow has taken you. Angels have no thought of ever returning you. Would they be angry if I thought of joining you? Gloomy Sunday, gloomy Sunday, with shadows I spend it all. My heart and I have decided to end it all. Soon there'll be candles and prayers that are sad, I know. Let them not weep, let them know that I'm glad to go. Death is no dream, for in death I'm caressing you. With the last breath of my soul I'll be blessing you. Gloomy Sunday.
Thank you all so much. I wouldn't have been able to do this performance tonight without my friend Bugsy. Oh, so talented. Him and his puppet band. Give them another round of applause, please, won't you? Yes, thanks. That last number is dedicated to a very, very special man I once had in my life. He once told me he'd do anything for me. And it wasn't until I saw him jump out of the window of that high-rise on 52nd Street that I knew too late that he meant every word he said. We'll go on and laugh. It's funny, isn't it? Someone gets it. Who would have thought, all these years later, you and I'd still be friends?
I thought for certain one of us would have been dead by now.
Well, what's your point?
Conventionally speaking, that puts an end to most things.
Funny you should mention that. How is it again you haven't kicked the bucket? You know, croaked, out of business, pushing up daisies, walk the plank.
Bugsy, don't be rude. You don't ask someone how they haven't aged in 71 years, or if they've had work done. Not under this roof. They're my guest.
It's quite alright. It's simple, really. For every man I murder, I take on the years they have left to live. Anyone can do it, provided they have no conscience.
I guess it checks out. But, how do you know when to quit?
I don't.
Does it matter? Ah, yes. Welcome back, my children of rot. We were just doing some catching up with an old friend of mine. I'm afraid I can't provide you his real name, but you may call him
The Doodler.
That's the best you could come up with? The Doodler?
Why not maybe the sketcher, or the artist, or the dark pen, or even the illustrator?
You think I chose the Doodler? The press did. Did I get something impressive, something intimidating, like Jack the Ripper, Son of Sam, Zodiac Killer, the Hillside Strangler? Of course not. I get stuck with the first nickname some hack journalist decided to plug in a headline.
Doodler here. Didn't rise to fame until January of 1974.
It's the Achilles heel of every serial killer. I, myself, was no exception. I got comfortable. Cocky.
You got sloppy is what you got.
Like any true artist, I'd rather say I got lost in my work.
San Francisco has long stood as a mecca for the gay community, even as far back as the 1970s. But those were different times, I'm afraid. The LGBTQ movement was in its infancy, and gay culture was far from accepted. Most men felt compelled to live their lives in the closet, and discretion was of the utmost importance. If outed, they could face innumerable consequences, including but not limited to being fired, disowned by their own families, and even arrested. This made it very simple for a sinister influence to prowl the already vulnerable community with little to no consequence. Was this your, motivation? Hunting for people who are already in fear of being ridiculed? That's just tacky.
Of course not. I myself am gay. I'll have you know I live my life in the open now.
Oh really? Is that why you requested your face to be blurred?
I assure you my being gay has nothing to do with why I want my face blurred. It might, just might, be due entirely to the fact that I have killed people!
And on that note, it was 1:57 a.m., January 27th of 1974, that your first victim was found. At Ocean Beach, a 49-year-old man by the name of Gerald Cabana, stabbed repeatedly. Defensive wounds proved that he had fought back. He had lived a lonely life as a bachelor, spending his days working in a mattress factory of all places, as if that wasn't bad enough. The second victim was found June 25th, 27-year-old Joseph Stevens. He was a female impersonator and performed at a drag bar named rather boldly Finocchio's, as Finocchio is a colorful Italian euphemism used to describe a gay man. Poor Joseph was found only moments after he had died by a woman out for a morning walk. Tell me, why didn't you ever move the bodies? They were always found at the same place they'd been murdered.
I may have been sloppy, but I was no rookie. Given how I did the job, had I transported their remains in my vehicle, their DNA would have been all over the place.
And pray tell, when did you earn your, nickname?
That damn name again. It's in reference to my approach. I would visit these night spots with pencil and paper in hand. After I'd order a drink, I'd begin looking over the gentlemen at the bar. I would search each face for something different. Something that stood out. Something with character. Of course, gay men are like anyone else. They enjoy a little flattery. I'd make it rather obvious that I was sketching their portrait. Inevitably, they would make their way over. And after a compliment or two, they'd leave with me.
Oh, for Christ's sakes. Spare us all the tawdry details.
Oh no, my intents were rarely for sex. Just murder. I would suggest they should accompany me to my private studio. And then, well, with each of the hundreds of faces I've added to my portfolio, I've prolonged my life.
Oh, speaking of portfolios and portraits, can you explain to the audience why your police sketch depicts you as a black man?
Ha! Would you look at that? This sketch looks like it was done by a nearsighted grade schooler. Despite its quality, I know who that is. I saw that fellow quite often while I was out hunting. He was simply at the wrong place at the wrong time. He was never even questioned by the police. I added him to my collection.
Was that before or after Klaus Christmann? The poor fellow was visiting from Germany, and his stay was, cut short when you slashed his throat in 3 different places and stabbed him repeatedly in the back. David Toshi, an investigator in your case, and the Zodiac killers, said it was one of the most vicious murders he had ever witnessed.
I found that fellow had a wife and children waiting for him overseas. I despise a cheater.
You waited until May of 1975 to commit the next murder. He was named Frederick Capon. He was only 32, and he had served our country in the Navy. Evidence suggests you dragged him 20 feet in some kind of struggle before he was stabbed several times in the aorta. Little was said in regards to your other victims in San Francisco, but the number alleged by authorities, I believe, was 14.
Close. I committed 15 in San Fran before traveling to other cities. May I be honest? My experience there was incredibly frustrating.
Oh, good grief. The nickname again?
Well, that and so many other things. Did you know the majority of the local papers refused to even mention the murders? Newspapers were worried that the very mention of gay men would be considered too vulgar for their audience. And those papers that did mention it blamed my victims for living an alternative lifestyle. I can say without hesitation, my victims were only guilty of being true to themselves. After I caught wind of all of this, I was furious. I had earned a good headline and my victims were innocent. So I targeted a handful of high-profile gentlemen to stir the pot. Among them, a diplomat and a very well-known entertainer.
Oh, who was it? Anyone I know? Oh, for pity's sakes, he's still alive. Unfortunately.
I know! That's the point! 3 of them I let live, just so they could go to the police, to test and see how far the charade in all parts would go. These men, these survivors, valued their careers and so-called reputations over human life. I was even arrested at one point, but they refused to identify me in court. All of them were alike.
I find it difficult to accuse them of being the villain, especially since, you tried to kill them.
Yes. These men had the authority and the prestige to ruin me. I gave them a golden ticket to rescue their fellow man, and they squandered it. All because they felt shame and fear of ridicule. As for the damn police, they had a stockpile of tips and leads. Not only these men, but from my own psychiatrist, of all people.
I warned you. Psychologists only stand in the way of progress. That's all they're good for. They put us all out of work.
And I should have listened. I will call the psychiatrist Mr. Priest. His office was in the East Bay. He called the police station in 75, shortly after my alleged last murder. He gave them my age, my name, and even my license plate number. All to no avail. Shoddy police work at its finest.
What about the shrink? What'd you do with him?
Oh, they're still out there. I chose not to kill him. His guilt should be enough.
What on earth is he guilty of?
He only called the police after I threatened to murder him. I found out that amongst his services, he offered conversion therapy. He called it psychological intervention. I called it a toxic pseudoscience guaranteed to drive their patients further into self-loathing and depression.
Call me crazy for trying to talk rationally with a murderer, but I'm trying hard to follow you.
My point is this, that although much progress is still needed to be made, we thankfully live in a new age. An age where the LGBTQ community is considered to be the same as everyone else. The stigma is no longer what it used to be. Gay men and women can be open and live their lives as they choose. You could be a lawyer, a doctor, a horror host, or even a murderer like myself. This new world of acceptance has made my job much more difficult. No longer are gay-oriented crimes swept under the rug, but be warned, I like a challenge.
Well, on that oddly optimistic note, we will leave you, my children of rot. Just remember, there's a reason why the police today remain tight-lipped on the Doodler case. It's because they know he's still out there.
Before you go, has anyone ever told you that you have the most interesting profile?
You could very easily be our next show's subject of interest. Only time and
It's not funny.
the Doodler can say for certain. But if I were you, I would err on the side of caution. And as always, remember me as you scroll by. If you liked our show, then please subscribe. As we are now, so you must be. Prepare for death and follow me. Ha 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 ha!